Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, and welcome to this conversation of inclusively. These are conversations that we do to talk about different issues around inclusivity and diversity. And today we're going to talk about how can both women and men benefit from gender diversity. Unlike some of the events on this kind of topic, which are usually led and attended by women, we try to make it more inclusive and have uh, both women and men on the panel to talk about how we're experiencing actually working together. And I can see from the audience, among which we have some known people, so welcome all new and old, that it's pretty much mixed. So it's both men and women, and we look forward, as always, to your contribution. So before we get started, a couple of housekeeping notes. This will be available offline afterwards. And this is a conversation which it's an unscripted conversation which we will talk about all those issues, and we do welcome your input, your questions, your comments, but please do submit them as we go along. Everybody can read them, so be polite and considerate. But also don't wait until the end, because we don't have a Q&A at the end. We'll just keep going, talking with each other, and hopefully with you as well. So feel free to either use the Q&A or the chat, and we'll get your questions. The sooner you ask them, the more likely you are that we will address them. So today we have more people than usual. It's going to be a total of 5 of us. And so with me is going to be Chris Lewis, who is my co-host on Inclusively. We run this together as a project. And then we have Lesley Holt from UKTIN, Marc Gilmour from ConnectiviTree, and Vicky Messer from Picocom. So what I would like to do is to give you a sense of who we are and what we do. I'm going to ask Chris, my co-host. I bet most of you know him, but let's get started with him, and then we'll go with everybody else, and then we'll just open the gates and discuss this. And I'm sending you a link about Inclusively, so you get a sense of what we do and see previous recordings. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Monica, and welcome everybody, especially our guest live on the session this afternoon. When we started Inclusively, the aim was thinking about how do we build a more inclusive telecoms industry as a whole, both internally within the organizations and the suppliers, but also in terms of engaging with customers. And the more we get into it, we can go down to very narrow topics, or we can deal with the bigger topics. And I must admit, I didn't think we'd ever end up talking about the male female issue, but of course it's important, because it is still a topic that gets a lot of people very involved, and we do need to head towards a more balanced employment within all sorts of organizations. So what I think is interesting, and I was in a session yesterday with a major telco, and we were talking about inclusion and how do we define inclusion. And it's interesting that the very first thing they said was, well, first of all, we have to be able to connect people. We've got to make sure that the networks we produce and the services we offer actually reach everybody on the planet. So that's one, I feel like that's one big challenge that we face. And then in terms of that, whether we call it diversity and inclusion or equity, diversity, and inclusion, the labels in many ways don't really matter. It's the intention that we have to build a more balanced industry, which is where we're aiming. So I think if you think of it in a hierarchy, that yes, of course, we need to make sure everyone has the ability to be connected, that has the skills to be connected. And then in terms of that balance, and obviously, given my own situation of being blind, I'm very interested in the people with different disabilities and how we make sure that becomes included. So there is a sort of there is a numbers game here as well. And of course, the balancing of the male female is the biggest. It's the obvious one where we want the best diversity, the most balanced approach. So I for one, having worked for the last 40 years in the telecom industry and on the research and consulting side, very, very aware that the industry that I've been involved with has been very male dominated, and that obviously today there are many, many more female representatives at every level, which is great across the industry. So I'm hoping to learn a great deal from the conversation today, because the most important thing for those of you who read To Kill a Mockingbird at a young age at school, the most important thing is to be able to stand in the shoes of the other person and understand the situation. Now, I do that obviously from a disability point of view. I stand in the shoes of other blind people, of other people, other disabilities. But to get this topic and to clarify and get the right airing of the topic, I think we need to stand in the shoes and make sure we understand both sides of it. Because if we are in a situation of rebalancing and bringing more women into the workforce, obviously that means less men in the workforce. So we need to understand how this impacts the industry as a whole. Now, I'm very cognizant of the fact that I'm treading on very delicate ground, so I'm going to be quiet there and pass back to Monica, and then let's have the conversation, the discussion, and hopefully we can clarify some issues. We can get the right issues on the table, and begin to understand it from everyone else's point of view. So standing in everybody else's shoes, and make sure we can build a better industry, a better industry to work in, and a better industry in terms of delivering the service to the customers. Back to you, Monica.
Thanks, Chris. And so I'd like to introduce Lesley, and I forgot to mention, but this is in partnership with UKTIN. And actually, UKTIN has been the inspiration for creating this, because they organized an excellent event in London, which I attended, and it was all women, pretty much, where we talked with each other. And this whole issue also came up of, yes, we talk to each other, but what about men? We want to involve men as well in this discussion, because it's not just about us, it's about everything. So I am very happy to have Lesley there. Actually, Vicky was at that meeting as well. But Lesley, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what is it you do at UKTIN?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for inviting me. So just to set the scene, I'm Director of Acceleration and Adoption at WM5G, and WM5G are one of the 4 partners that deliver UKTIN. So for those that perhaps don't know, UKTIN is the UK Telecoms Innovation Network, and I won't try and explain all that we do because it's super vast, but actually one of the areas that I'm responsible for is delivering our talent and skills work stream. So we've got a lot of insight. We've certainly gained a lot of insight since UKTIN has been in existence, in terms of responding to actually what is a shortage of skills in our sector. So we're really, really keen to drive skills now, to drive talent for the future. And actually what we're keen to do is making sure that we have as wide a talent pool as possible. So actually, when you're looking at the current workforce, then I think, we've got a very large and disproportionate amount of, or less women in the workforce, let's put it that way. I think there's actually at director level, I think in the UK, 3% of women in our sector are at director level. And actually it was 4.7% in 2021. At senior level, it's increased a little bit. I think it's about 5%. And if we look at the whole telecoms workforce, I think we're talking more like 19%. So the figures are there. Women are not represented in our sector well, but the reason I'm super keen, and the reason a lot of feedback from our telecoms advisory group that we run is actually, there's a skill shortage. So how do we tap as wide a talent as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's actually amazing because there's a lot of more women coming in, but at the same time, when you get to the top level, seniority is different. As an analyst, I've been at Mobile World Congress this year. There was one event that there was no woman other than me. I mean, really. And there were a bunch of people. So anyway, Marc, you are you're on the spot. Go ahead. Tell us who you're muted. Okay, there
we go. What you mean on the spot, as in I'm the token old white male? No, I'm actually really looking forward to this conversation. So Marc Gilmour, I'm CTO these days at ConnectiviTree, which is a a wholesale high capacity data provider and software automation company. I've spent all of my career in telecoms and various pieces on both the operator and the vendor side. And I'm also a father to three daughters as well as a son. But and when we were doing the prep for this, it came up quite interestingly. I hadn't thought about it, but from a line management and kind of like a next layer up management over my career, it's actually about 50-50 in terms of male female for me. I've spent about half of my career working for female leadership in my career. So interesting. I think we'll talk about it, but I think we came to the conclusion that is a little bit not quite as the norm. And so but I'm sure we'll get onto something like that. But yeah, really interested about this discussion. But I have to say, probably I've done a lot of panels before, a lot of discussion pieces on all different sorts of topics, but this is probably the one that has made me the most nervous in preparation for that. So I'll be very open about that. So be kind, be gentle with me.
It's okay to be nervous. It's okay. We want you to get out of your comfort zone. We all are. Vicky, what about you?
Hi, Vicky Messer, VP of Product Management at Picocom. So in the last 30 years, I've worked in mobile telecoms from 2G base stations and now working on 5G chipset design. So it's been primarily on the vendor side, whether it's chips or base stations or small cells. So unlike Marc, I've not had that operator experience. And yes, I think in that time, both at university and through college, through all of the places I've worked, it has that, I haven't seen a big improvement on the diversity. I think some companies are better than others. And it's interesting to understand what makes a company better for the likes of myself and where you can grow. And then some are absolutely opposite. And I have actually walked away from companies that haven't supported me, and I felt that I've been able to get promoted or have led to mental health issues. Luckily, the last 5 years have gone really well. Where I've been, and I've had, been able to excel in areas and be able to give something back in the likes of these discussions.
Yeah, and I think that that's very interesting what you're saying, is that I think that for a lot of women, even if you eventually succeed, you've gone through a lot of issues. I mean, I guess everybody has, in life, but it just seems like sometimes the gender creates some specific things you have to deal with. That doesn't seem like you should not be quitting your job because, I think that I started a sense of feeling part because as being a woman, everything was it's so much easier to just be on your own. You don't have to deal with that stuff. So I kind of insulated myself, but is that the best way? Now, there is a very quick question for Lesley, and this is from Tracy. Is the 33% of directors are women, or 3% of women in telecoms are director? I think it's the first.
3% of women are at director level in our sector.
Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's get started, and I think that there is a one thing that we can get started and then we keep going, is the lack of talent and the sort of aging workforce. So in telecoms, and this is kind of news to me because I love telecoms. I don't see why is it that a young person couldn't find it absolutely compelling, but apparently that's the case. So there is a general issue in telecoms to attract new talent, and specifically to attract new talent that are women. So and we're seeing in sort of an aging workforce, and this aging workforce, of which we all are representative here, tends to be predominantly male. So, you know, we cannot fix the problem right now because we are who we are. We're not going to start firing people and hiring new people at you know, some level. But we want to make sure that the people that come in is, you know, more equally spread across gender lines. So what is your thought about that? Why is it that you know, we're not able to attract talent, and especially women within that group? And I don't know, maybe Lesley, you want to start, since you're actually working on this more actively than the rest of us.
Sorry, was that to me, Monica?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh,
Well, or
apologies.
anybody can do it, but everybody.
Sorry. No, well, I think there's a couple of things there. I think, again, stats that we've got is 3% of the telecoms population is under the age of 35. So that just reinforces the point that you made, Monica, about the fact that we're not attracting young people into the sector. Why are we not? Well, we've done some high-level research as part of our talent forum. We've engaged with over 100 stakeholders in industry, in academia, skills providers, to kind of get a sense of feel. And we've also been engaged with DSIC quite extensively. And a recent report that we've got shows that actually one of the big things is actually awareness of the sector. So, you know, and we know firsthand from careers affairs that if we talk about the sector, we really are not getting people knowing actually that what the sector is and actually what the opportunities are. So we want to do a course correct on that. And there's a couple of things that we can perhaps point people to. One is the ITP, which is the Institute of Telecoms Professionals, have recently, and within the last few weeks, launched a careers roadmap, which I think is really, really useful information that's really been missing, that kind of shows the various roles and the different career paths. And interestingly, something that we've done is we've created a young ambassadors program. So we're trying to get young people that are already in the sector to actually come forward as ambassadors, so that they can feed back on, you know, where they are, what roles, how they enter the sector, what's exciting about, you know, because actually having someone like me or a role model, I think, is super, super important. That's great. You said, Monica, what initiatives have we got? Actually, we've also hit a problem in doing that initiative, in that actually when we've engaged to get young ambassadors, we've had way more, you know, young men coming forward than we have young women. So actually a call to action, if we would love to have more women in that program, because actually by default we'll be perpetuating the problem of showing male role models. But it is just where we are, you know, it's just the fact that we are not getting these role models coming forward at the moment. And we need to, I think the point is I just said about the ITP and about roles, and it's very important, but I also think it's actually talking about the sector in terms of the fantastic projects, the exciting opportunities, opposed to just the role, because I think people's perception of what our sector is can be quite basic, and it isn't, you know, well known, the breadth and the excitement in terms of the range of projects and activities that telecoms, or I prefer to say connectivity, actually touches all sectors.
It's interesting because, you know, all young people have their mobile phone and they couldn't live without it. And I think back to when I sort of joined the telecom sector at Motorola in the 90s. I guess it was the early days of mobile phone, very, very early days of mobile phones. And I was thinking, well, how did I get interested in it? Well, I enjoyed the course, so I was already on the electronics course, and I enjoyed the communications part of it. And I guess there was a project supervisor and a project that I did on mobile phone technology, so that got me into it as well. But also I applied to Motorola, and I'd heard of Motorola. It was quite a well-known company. You know, you'd have Motorola car phones and whatever. So I guess it's that brand awareness as well. And obviously, you know, people are aware of the operators' names, but they probably aren't aware of, vendors, vendor names, and think, oh, well, I could go and work for that company, but they all know about Google and Amazon. So it's almost awareness of those big companies, what companies you could have a career. And I guess that could be something that helps, maybe, that those partnerships of local universities maybe might help in that area to try and attract, get local companies to sponsor events, or that might be a way of just making awareness of some of the local telecoms companies in the area that those graduates may be interested in joining. And then I guess there's internships, and I know we've participated at Picocom with internships, and that's UKESF, I think it is, and that's a good way of also getting people into the sector. But generally, we've taken people from silicon design, so rather than just sort of telecom systems. So I think there's some further opportunities there, I think, for improvements.
I think there's also, take one step back, and certainly when we look at it from the European market point of view, we've got obviously Vodafone, Orange, BT, all now with female chief execs. But I'm pretty sure we've never had that before in the sector. And of course, and also people trying to rebrand. You look at BT with EE, where they're pushing this new, more consumery, more younger oriented brand. So getting away from the dare we say, the post office when some of us started working. And I think the changing nature of what telecoms does and the way the services are built, the fact that we're more soft, it's a more software centric business than before, does open up more opportunities, but it also ties it back to that talent pool that Lesley mentioned. So what's coming out of university or out of apprenticeships in terms of are we getting a balance? Are we getting enough software people? Are we getting enough a balanced set of software people coming through? And as you quite rightly said, Claire, the temptation, sorry, Vicky, is they want to work for the big brands. They're the brands they see every day on those mobile devices. So yeah, there is a brand job for the telcos to do. There's a brand job for the industry to do. But I think it's shifting. It's moving away from that physical engineering. And certainly when I was at my degree at UMIS back in the 80s in Manchester, we did a degree in computational linguistics. So we had people doing languages. We had more women in that group than any other part of UMIS at the time. It was brilliant. The balance of people in there was fantastic. But I think that was very unusual. So I suspect your electronics degree was probably not as balanced as mine was.
Marc, why don't let me I guess I put you on the spot. When you are hiring, are you looking at how? I mean, so we talked about what is that we can do to get more awareness at the college level or incoming, but what is that you can do as an employer to get more women or to get a more balanced workforce, whatever?
Actually, the challenge is not just on diversity of gender or any other diversity metric. Actually, it's getting people, full stop. Yeah, I think that is a part of the challenge. Chris mentioned about the changing dynamic of the telecoms industry and moving to a software, or including a software. I would like to say including a software element, because we can't step away from the actual physical connectivity piece as well, which is actually what we do. All of these great brands that attract the headlights and can turn heads in terms of moving into those industries that software developers may want to go in, and et cetera. It's nothing without the underlying network or capability to make all of that happen, which is why we've seen initiatives from those big players to come into the space to try and help move the telecoms environment along. So because ultimately it advances their direction, their business model, etc. The challenge I face is when I look at a group of candidates, more often than not, it's not a very diverse group that I'm looking at. And so I don't even get the chance to think in terms of diversity because I've only got that candidate pool that I have in front of me. And I'm not making choices based on that. I prefer to make choices based upon capability, and culture fit into my team, into the the company that I'm at, or how we're developing. And so yeah, I've never come to the situation yet where it becomes a pure question of gender. And never should it be, I think. But I've never had that situation. One, because maybe I've not even had the choice, or two, because there have been other things that have swayed that decision, mainly from a capability and availability point of view.
Yeah, and I think that you're mentioning, sorry, go ahead, Lesley.
No, I was just going to say a couple of points on something Chris said and something Mark said as well. I think talking about skills, I think there's absolutely a convergence of skills, and that provides an opportunity, but it also provides a threat, because actually if the sector is struggling, like Mark is saying, he may not have choices because he's looking for certain capabilities. If we're now competing with tech and IT that can be, far more attractive, there's certainly maybe brand and sector awareness far higher than telecoms. Actually, by diversity, it actually causes a problem, because actually the convergence of skills means actually other sectors are way more attractive, so it causes a problem. And I think the other comment on how do we get young people looking at telecoms as a career so that Mark has the choice, is we've done a lot of work talking to careers advisors, and there just isn't the information out there. Careers advisors do not know at all how they can navigate and how they can advise young people on how to get a career in our sector. And we've spoken to quite a large number, and that's the findings. So actually young people are going to at advisory level, whether it be when they're making choices at GCSE or A level, or even leaving university, in terms of careers advice, very poor in terms of the information available to them to suggest our sector as a career.
Lesley, I can back that up with my very own completely unscientific and not incredibly wide-reaching survey that I conducted after one of our prep calls ahead of this session. And because my wife works in teaching and has done for a long while now. She's currently fortunate. She works in the private sector, in private school, and they have a very strong careers fair. In fact, they had one last Friday on that. But it was very backed up exactly what you said. The what we would call the telco industry, or the tech and IT and telco industry, just isn't represented. They don't know what we do. And I back this up with, over the years, when I've said I work in telecoms, I work with the mobile operator. I say, oh, could you get me a good deal on a phone? That's generally how the representation comes back, is, with regards to that consumer that, I work. I've worked for Three in the past, been involved in them for day. Oh, can you get me a deal? They think that you work in the retail aspect of it. And that's just, yeah, it's, I think that falls back upon us as an industry to sort that out. And regardless of whatever the industry is, if you want to attract people into that, then they've got to be able to see themselves in that space.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's vitally important that we do have some champions within the industry from all aspects of the diversity and inclusion arena. Even if there's just one is sufficient to be a role model, to be able to or to be a spokesperson, to be able to say, look, somebody has done it, and somebody can move in that. It's incredibly unfair on that one, but we always need a pioneer. There always needs to be a pioneer, and also I think we have to think a bit more laterally in terms of how to come into this space. I was thinking back on how I came into telecoms, because my education didn't really take me in this direction, but I came into it because I took a temporary job at a local telecom provider, because I live down in Hampshire, which is where they're now Arqiva, but they used to be NTL they've split into Arqiva and Virgin Media, and it used to be NTL, and before that it was the IBA. Had a major facility outside of Winchester here in Hampshire, and I took a temporary job there, and so I kind of fell into the telecom market, and so the skills that I have today I've honed over the years. I didn't come out of university with those skills. I came those, and to be perfectly frank, the skills that I had back then are no longer valid for what we need today. Some of it is still valid, but to be perfectly frank, we're moving in a different direction. So we also have to get better as an industry at in-job, in-field training and moving that along. And I think from an operator community, we've kind of, on a broader sense, have kind of abdicated that responsibility to universities or to big vendors, and are reliant on that. Some of that skill base and knowledge set has moved out of those operator spaces. If I think back over the years, the big R&D departments are shrinking, and so we're not. There's a wholesale rethink that needs to happen in that, and we as a relatively new company are trying to build that in so that we can bring some of those functions, some of that RDI, that research, development, and innovation, but also that bringing on of new talent, trying to bring them in early. I was talking with a really interesting software company based out of Belgium, and they're talking about some of the things that they're doing with a local university. They're based in Leuven in Belgium, just outside of Brussels, with the local universities there to bring talent in. And they say, we don't need them to have this sort of skills, we need them to have basic skills and the aptitude, and then we'll bring them in and we'll train them up. But it's interesting that it's still quite male dominated, even coming in there.
So let me talk a little bit. Both all of you mentioned the importance of role models and champions, and clearly that's important. You see women and you say, well, I can do it too. But in order to get there, one way that some people argue to do it is to basically hire more women. But you want to hire people based on qualifications. So should we at some point sort of compromise a little bit, or do we run the risk of tokenism where you just hire somebody because it's a woman? And I remember when I was at the UKTIN event, there was somebody from Ericsson saying, I don't want to be hired to do anything or selected for a position because as a woman. That's kind of demeaning. I want to be hired because I'm good. I don't want to be treated any different. And when we had a call, like, we want to be normal. We just want to be like everybody else, not special. Yeah. And I know, Vicky, we talked about it, so maybe you can comment on that, because I think this is really important. At the same time, yes, we want to have more women, but we want to make sure we do not fall into just hiring women because they're women, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I mean I've always been very well qualified for the jobs I've gone through, and I've not had a problem getting jobs. But I think once I'm in the organisation, it's sometimes been difficult. I've had to work harder to prove myself. And then getting promoted has always been a bit of a challenge within in having that career path. It has been difficult. So I think that's one thing. And another thing that sort of came up earlier was the I'm trying to think what we were talking about. Sorry.
Tokenism. Being normal and being like everybody.
Yeah, being normal. Yes, sorry. So with the normal thing, I mean, you know, I think I remembered what else I was going to say. Motorola, you know, they had a graduate scheme. I joined as a graduate, so that's a great path in. You know, for a new graduate, you know, you're not the only one. And there was training. There was a Motorola University. And, you know, so I think management did a really good job, you know, sort of trying to, you know, train you up. You know, I was sent on an assertiveness course. Well, I was suggested I went on an assertiveness course, which was helpful, you know, and it sort of, although there was only me in the RF team of about 15, you know, that was a useful skill to have. One thing that we did talk about in the prep was there was a curry evening, and I was never invited, which, you know, that is the opposite of being treated as normal. What you want to do is you want to be treated the same as everybody else. So, you know, that was, you know, I look back on that and think, you know, that would never happen now. But at the time, and I was, you know, cross about it at the time as well. And it's just, you know, it's little things like that which just make you feel, you know, that you're not, you know, you're not part of the rest, you know, the rest of the team. So I think it is really important that you go in and you don't feel you have to prove yourself more than anyone else, and you're treated, you know, treated just the same. You're respected for your skills, and you're listened to, and you're you know, you don't feel you have to work harder than anyone else. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I've got a couple of observations, Monica, if I may, from everything Vicky and Marc said, really. I think one observation, and I haven't got the exact statistics here, but I know we can get them, but Generation Z, I get confused with my generations, but the up-and-coming generation that are coming into the workforce now have very different views of the workplace than perhaps we do, and certainly some of the, you know, generations younger than us. And actually, culture of an organisation is actually very high up on the list. It's one of the top 3, I believe, in terms of them choosing a company to go to. So some of the things you said there, Vicky, which align to culture, you know, somebody that's starting their career will make a choice, and they won't be picking the types of organisations that don't align to their values. It's very, very strong. So,
Lesley, can I just come back on quickly on that point about culture? I've noticed that, and I tend to have the same thought process these days, but I don't think I would ever have thought about that 20 years ago in my career. I don't think I would have been brave enough to kind of have that within my criteria. Today, yes, more so, but I'd just like to back that up. It's only anecdotal, but I know from my own position, and I find that interesting that it's coming in much earlier in career than
absolutely, because we perhaps wouldn't have looked at it through that lens, whereas values is a big thing now. And I think also, I think it was you, Marc, that said about, you know, when you get asked about, you know, what you do, and, you know, where I get the best phone deal, kind of links to something that we want to develop. We've done a little bit of work on it, and I think it's important, and I value people's views on this. But if we're going to articulate what our sector is, then I think it's really important to perhaps have impact stories. So we've talked about role models, and I think that's important, and we're certainly looking at that, particularly young ambassadors. But I think impact stories are equally important. And what I mean by that is actually, again, not talking about the job, but actually what's the activity that you're doing and what impact. It kind of links to values, which is important, but it also links to a bit of an insight in terms of what the role is. So a day in the life of, or understanding, we've had some great examples from people that we've spoken to, for example, 5G connectivity at the King's coronation. So let's talk about that opportunity. Somebody I was speaking to was talking about 5G at Wembley, and we've got plenty of projects that we've done in our own company with health, talking about a 5G pill in a camera, when you look at it, oh wow, that's what some of the technology and the telecoms technology and the future technology can enable, and I can be part of that. So I'm super keen to hear, again, another call to action of actually how can we pull together, or if people have already got this resource, please share it, because those impact stories I think will be much more enticing to showcase our sector than perhaps what we have already.
And you've got those UKTIN projects, all over the country with different use cases that, I think, if more marketing can be done to the general public and, career, students, prospective students, I think that would be good, rather than just keeping it to the industry.
Exactly. We talk to ourselves a lot, Vicky, and that's not going to, we need to be, it's easy to do that, isn't it? But we need to, I guess all of us here are involved in this telecom sector in some form or other, and actually that's great, but we probably know about some of these exciting things. So how do we widen our base?
Yeah, there's one in Bath at the moment, at the rugby ground, that's happening this year with 5G for public safety communication, which is we're providing chips to the hardware for that, and and also in the pump rooms or in the Roman baths, so that's quite an interesting sort of project, and to get maybe the local universities, it maybe also getting a tour of it, that would be also great.
And it should be easier to do that, shouldn't it? Because in the past it was a very closed shop in terms of engineers and literally people going up flagpoles or up those masts to do the work. And actually, because connectivity, to go back to your point, Lesley, connectivity is embedded in everything that everybody does. So making that exciting and saying, we can connect. Rugby is a great example with the mouth guards that the players wear and all the information that's transmitted around that. And I just wrote a short piece about what Orange is doing in the Olympics, which includes some para athletes swallowing these little capsules to measure their no, serious. Have a look.
I know. Yeah.
It's fascinating. So I think it's that bringing out that bit of it rather than, and certainly from my role as an analyst, I think we expect everyone to understand what we do, and actually it's more the opposite. It's what we can do to go back to the Lord Kitchener post, isn't it? It's not what you can do for us, but what we can do for you, sort of thing. It's a different story, and it's not about everyone coming to telecoms and being telecom specialists. It's about how do we build connectivity into every aspect of life, and the more we do that, then the better chance we've got of attracting all sorts of people into the workforce.
There's another sort of growth industry which has got quite a lot of momentum at the moment around 5G, and that's satellite communication, so non-terrestrial satellite. And I think that could be another area that might capture the imagination of future graduates as well. So, I think, we there's a lot of interest, I think, by younger people around space, and I think that might Capture the
You're-
imagination.
I was going to say, Vicky, we've had engaged with someone from the space agency, and we had a fantastic conversation because, like you said, it was be interesting. And they said, actually, we have a problem because twofold problem is when they talk about space, people kind of narrow it down to what space is, and they kind of think it's, you know, on a trip to the moon, or they kind of think, well, actually, it's so narrow, it's not for me. And actually, it's vast, the opportunities. But so that it's funny that you should say that, but they've equally encountered problems because of people's perceptions can be narrow and not realizing the opportunities. So we share a lot of, well, I say we, it's part of the sector, but we share some of the issues there as well.
If we can shift a little bit, so clearly one big challenge is to hire women, but then the next one is to retain them, because a lot of them sort of join and then kind of fizzle out, or, you know, decide that that's not for them. And, you know, as Lesley, you were saying, you know, like the new generation can bring in the requirement. I mean, they focus on values more, and that might trigger change. What do you think we should change in order to make to be able to retain women? So how's the culture, how should the culture change to make it more welcoming, I guess, to women?
Yeah, so two things really. The Royal Academy of Engineering, I think it was last year, certainly have got a statistic that showed 50%. No, what is it? 57% of females drop off their register by the age of 35, 57%, compared with 17% drop off from men. So we're losing women, and you can do the maths at age 35, I guess, as to the reasons why. So we do. So you're talking, Monica, about retaining women. Actually, statistically, if we look at that, we're not retaining them. And interesting, I looked at a report yesterday from McKinsey. Now, it was their workplace survey they do 2023. Now, it was based on the USA, not the UK, but I think there's probably lots of takeouts that would be very similar. And what the top three benefits, one of the top three benefits was flexible working. But it wasn't a top three benefit for women. It was a top three benefit that people saw for both, you know, men and women wanted that flexibility. Now, arguably, and again, I forget the statistics, but it's quite high in the 70s, I think, of percentage of women that are carers, whether it's childcare or looking after the elderly. They take on a disproportionate amount of caring. So flexible working is something that if it's in the top three, but importantly, and I'm really personally focused on the fact that we want a workplace that creates benefit and equality amongst the whole workforce. So you're talking about retaining women, but if we can be advocates and introduce policies that have advantage for everybody in the workplace, then I believe that's a win-win, because we're not then looking to, you know, favoritize or whatever. There's equal benefit. But I think it's quite interesting if flexible working and different ways of working are deemed to be a really high benefit across the piece. I think that's one of the key things that we could look at.
And how ironic that really the comms industry, the telecommunications industry, should be the one that really can adopt flexibility better than others, seeing as we're enabling it for all the other industries. So, you know, you would think that we can, and we can take a lead in that for sure. And I think we pivoted well during the pandemic, for example, but I have seen trends that kind of push it back and kind of pull it back and lose some of that flexibility. And I'm not just talking about working at home, but just different ways of working, different approaches to it, and trying to keep out that toxicity. I think any sort of toxic culture, or whether that's gender-based or any other basis for that, drives people away more so today than it ever has done. I think, and we see that even in the big marquee sort of brands outside of telco. If it's, you know, they may be attracted to there in the first place because it's a big name brand or whatever, but if it's a toxic culture, then people will move on wherever they get the chance to, and So I agree with Lesley. If there's things that we can do that help, that may be gender driven, but have applicability across genders and also other areas of inclusion and diversity, then that's got to be a win, for sure.
When I was lucky, when I well, I had about 3.5 years off after I had my second child, and I decided I wanted to get it back into the sector. And the government was running a returners scheme that was run through the Open University, and I don't know what happened to that scheme, but it was so it was sort of quite a bit like running an OU course for 3 months. So you had, you know, assignments and route tasks, etc. But a lot of it was reviewing your career history, learning about the changes in the industry, getting your CV up to date, and some information on job searching. And that certainly helped me get a very good job offer. The only thing was there was no flexibility, and it had to be full-time in the office every day. So my husband had to go part-time, which was very unusual. And luckily his employer allowed him to do that. So yeah, so we've managed to do it, you know, between us, you know, by maybe doing 4-day week each. And certainly I agree, the pandemic has definitely proven that, you know, employees can be trusted to work remotely and be very productive. So I think, you know, when I even when I wanted to was working full time, but wanted to work maybe 1 day from home, it was in the past was a big issue, and I wasn't even lab based. I understand, you know. So yeah, I completely agree, and I think that returner scheme was very useful for me, and also other people that I worked with on that course, on that particular course. We all joined LinkedIn very early, in the very early days of LinkedIn, and you know, sort of saw progress of careers, etc. So yes, I think that some scheme like that would be very useful. And I know there are, you know, sort of local, I mean, within Bristol, Siri Chapman, who works in Bristol, she does do quite a bit to sort of help support returners with her networking events, etc. But yeah, I don't know whether there would be some sort of national returners scheme for sort of STEM subjects, but I think that's another thing that could maybe be looked at, if we are losing people for various reasons, whether it's due to having children or just feeling that the sector's not for them.
Yeah, but and I guess that one way I look at it is like by having to sort of think about having a more diverse workforce in terms of gender, for instance, but not just that. And we need to change the culture that triggers some changes that are actually valuable to everybody else. As you know, as I was saying, you know, flexibility, it's an advantage for everybody, or toxicity is bad for everybody, not just you know, no matter who you are. And so I guess that one way to look at it is that diversity is going to introduce and make changes which are, again, good for everybody. It's just an opportunity to become a better environment. As long as, I guess that one of the risks is that, you know, you sort of have too much of a heavy hand in terms of enforcing it, and that might kind of backfire a little bit. But I think that that's an important way to think about it, is to improving life or workforce for everybody.
And Monica, it's got to be based on balance, because swinging the pendulum in any direction to the other end is a problem. I've seen that. I've seen where the pendulum has been switched, not just on gender issues, but on any sort of kind of focus point, because you end up with that, you know, group think, those biases where basically everybody's just drinking their own Kool-Aid and thinking that they're heading in the right direction, and there's no challenging thought to that. And that ends up causing that ends up causing more toxicity than anything else, because because it creates a clique. It creates kind of a them and us, and that can be just as challenging. So balance and being self-aware to know when that balance is coming out of kilter. That can be challenging. That can be challenging for leaders to pick up on, I think. Yeah, I think we've all had experiences where your face doesn't fit, and then therefore exit left or right.
I like what you said about groupthink there, because I think that is important in the fact that actually, and again, there's plenty of studies that show driving innovation, actually, you need challenge. So you need to actually challenge that groupthink. And the best way to challenge that groupthink is to have a diverse workforce, because you're having coming from conflicting and different views. So if you're looking at it from a productivity, why do I care if I have a gender balance in my workforce? Why do I care if I have equal opportunities, and the diversity is way broader than just male and females? Why do I care? Well, the bottom line is you should care, because actually evidence suggests it drives innovation to have a diverse team, and it also there's evidence to suggest that actually that companies that have got a board and a team that's more diverse are more likely to bring in a stronger bottom line. I hate to look at things from an economic perspective, but business is there to drive business and to drive productivity, and actually having the most diverse teams can do that. I think is a good reason to do so.
It goes back to what Chris said right at the beginning about putting yourself in the shoes of others. It's if you have a collective group that can put themselves metaphorically in different types of shoes of different others, then that makes a huge difference, because you then bring in different thought processes, different perspectives, different angles. So the diversity of thought piece, I think, is probably more, and you pull that from gender, you pull that from race, you pull that from sexuality, you pull that from all of those those different areas, because it just brings different perspective, and different perspective.
I do wonder, especially given the current climate and the sort of the polarization of thinking around economics and politics and everything, that people said they think they're right and they're not willing to entertain other issues. I think we do have an issue with that in whether it's in the UK or everywhere, in fact, don't we? Yeah. And so I think there is a willingness to listen to other opinions, and that's that's the jobs of the managers and the CEOs and the people running the businesses, is to make sure. And at the end of the day, especially in our industry, where everybody is a customer, and therefore the sort of things that we produce as services and the way we behave as brands and as businesses, will affect the way that customers think about it. Which, to go back to your point, Mark, about oh, you work in a really boring industry, but could you get me a deal on a phone? It's I think there's a lot about there's, and from an analyst point of view, whenever I'm putting a team together to do a project now, I look for diversity of opinions, because I want to make sure that just because I say something about the way the industry is going, I'm assuming other people have very different views, because we all have different backgrounds and we're all covering different topics. So I think diversity of opinion is extremely important.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess it's the diversity, and to what you're saying, you need to be accepting, being able to see each other's point of view, rather than telling you should do this. And unfortunately, there is a little bit of that, as I was saying, with polarization, everybody's, wants to be more virtuous and say, this is what we need to do. And the thing is that, no, we should just be open, to whatever is out there. So I think that's a really important different, that I think that would just address the need for women to stay in the workforce, just sort of as an end result, even though it's not necessarily the focus of.
But Monica, and perhaps this is drawing this to a close, that you know, giving people the confidence that they can present their opinions in a group meeting, that they can say, you know, this is what I think based on my experience. So, and that's true for everybody, isn't it? That, you know, whether you're male, female, you know, whether you come from an ethnic group or whatever, giving everyone the confidence to be able to do that. And also, and I think it goes back to something said very early on in the discussion, that if we don't raise awareness of this all through the education system, and it just occurred to me while some of you were talking, actually, you know, should we even make sure that in the curriculum for infant schools, that because they're interested in gaming, whatever, that they understand how the internet, not totally how it works, but at least some indication of how the internet works. And all the way through the education system, there should be something that says, by the way, when you go and play a game, or when you go and do this or whatever, this is roughly how it's working. So the relative role, and I'm pretty sure we don't do that in the system today.
So that would be the curriculum, wouldn't it, I guess?
Yeah, because that's something, you know, we're trying to open people's minds up to. You mentioned satellite and the like, or, you know, I love the stories about having 5G on the moon. You know, it's like, well, yeah, great, but if it triggers someone's mind, I remember stories on Blue Peter when I was a 6-year-old, you know, about people on the moon. Again, yeah, that's very interesting, or people living under the sea. So you've got to, you know, get people's imaginations flowing and to get them interested in it as early as possible. I think, but I love your, Vicky, I love your thing about the retraining bit. That I think is incredibly important, because, you know, we are at a situation with the industry where we're reducing the manpower in the industry because of the operational cost side of things, you know, so we will need to retrain people at all sorts of levels. And I think quite a lot of the feedback is that, you know, it's not always possible to do that, to make everyone coders and get everyone involved in that side, but actually to find a role that you're interested in an industry which, as you say, is more and more relevant to people's daily and business lives. I think that is a great opportunity.
Okay.
Just conscious we're getting short of time now, Monica, but I think my ask from anybody in the audience is, you know, UKTIN, we are conveners of stakeholders. So I'm really, really keen to know from anyone that's got some good practice or wants to share anything in this space that we can learn from and we can amplify, then I'm really keen for anyone to reach out, Monica.
Absolutely, and since we're at the top of the hour, we have to close. But similarly, and Lesley, if you hear anything, we're happy to hear from you. If there is anything you want to share, we can have another conversation like this, sort of a follow-up to talk about different aspects. Because at the end of the day, in order to get this kind of acceptance and avoid groupthink, one key way to do this is to go and talk to each other before we run into problems. So that's why Chris and I feel strongly about working on this. Okay, so here I wanted to acknowledge our partners that are helpful in terms of further promoting our view. And here you can see this one and future events by looking at our website. So thank you all, Chris, Mark, Lesley, Vicky, and all of you in the audience. It was a great conversation. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.